Hello, my name is Rafe.
My name is Kashyap.
My name is Kira.
And I'm Herda.
Hello, and I'm Rakul, and welcome to Central Peel's very own podcast where we indulge into fine young adult literature and what it teaches us.
Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that we are standing on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations.
It's always important to do a land acknowledgement, especially since we're working with Indigenous issues and a whole Indigenous book itself, right? So it's really important to do that.
Definitely.
So Eden Robinson, eh?
Yeah.
What an author.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah, I think she wrote 5 novels, right? And The Son of a Trickster is a trilogy, right?
Yeah.
And she also won some awards, like the International Acclaim for Dark and Gothic Fiction.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
I never knew that myself. That's really cool. Like you said, a whole trilogy, right? This is the first of a whole trilogy.
Yeah.
So what? There's 2 other books. I know the second one is called Trickster Drift, and that came out in 2019.
I heard that one's supposed to be really good from the reviews.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What would that be about?
don't know
When the main character gets older, Jared?
Yeah,
Right?
I think that...
What happens to all the characters? What happens to the
Yeah.
plot? Oh wow.
Yeah, would it be like Jared's whole life going down to his kids? How his kids would be affected of his actions?
Exactly.
It could
That's
go
something to think
any way,
about, right?
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna read it?
Oh, for sure.
Definitely.
For sure, yeah.
100%.
I mean, in the summer, we have so much time. Why not,
After
right?
reading this book, it's just, you have to read that book.
Yeah. Along with reading the next book, the show Trickster is supposed to be about the first book, Son of a Trickster.
Oh yes, I was actually planning to take a look at that later on.
It's supposed to be really, really good.
Yeah, CBC made a whole series, a whole live action series on Son of a Trickster. That's amazing.
That's pretty sick.
Maybe when I go home, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so before we begin, let's give a brief summary of the book.
Oh yeah, I could do that. So the book Son of a Trickster is about Jared, who was a 16-year-old high school kid who was a burnout. His mom was the scariest mom ever too. So Jared drinks too much and his mom's literally a mess. He can't rely on anyone for consistent love because there is no one he has support for, right? So Jared was a pot dealer to help his dad, from medications, and his dad was disabled due to some other reasons. So he was compassionate and caring, even for people twice his age, such as his neighbors. So Jared was the main character who had to keep his family together.
Yeah.
So, and a mystery that's been going on through the book was that his dad is a trickster, and everyone hated Jared due to that reason.
His dad, basically, he was a shapeshifter, right? So he had, a good face, I want to say, and then deep down, he would wreak havoc, right?
Yeah. In indigenous lore, or I guess cultures, tricksters are known as spirits or people who have lived on the earth for centuries and can shapeshift into different forms like crows, coyotes, and even people sometimes.
And it's crazy how Eden Robinson can kind of shift that into literature, especially for a target audience, which is ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we found really interesting in the book too, right?
And she definitely hits the target audience. She makes the book, as we were reading it was very entertaining to read too. The language style and the way it kind of conveys its message is really directed towards us. And there's a whole bunch of good characters there too.
So now in regards to the whole language style and the audience, do you think this book should be read in a school setting? What do you guys think?
So I personally think it should be, but of course at a higher grade level, just because of the fact that there's the use of language, right?
Yeah.
And there are some scenes and all that, which should be kept in mind. So I think it's good for I think grade 11, grade 12, but I don't know if it should be introduced early on.
Yeah.
Going off what you said, I would agree 100%. It would be more a tone for high school students rather than middle school students, because sometimes it's not that they wouldn't understand the idea, but sometimes the message they convey, it kind of can relate to high school students a little more. Yeah.
It also has
Agreeing with both Kashyap and Rafe, I think, especially with the important themes and use of drug use, and especially that Jared is someone who's supposed to be our age at around 16, it really kind of hits home to kids who are in a high school and much less to kids who are in, let's say, middle school.
Yeah. And now, bridging off of that, Jared is our age, and look at the struggles he's going through, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of like depicts the struggles of an indigenous teenager, right? So lack of resources, for example, right? I mean, for us, like when we go to school, we have guidance counselors, we have teachers like Mr. Shaskin who can help us, right? Who does Jared have to go to?
Yeah, and there was a time inside the book where Jared was left home alone with no cover, no food, and he had to use the school's washroom to take a shower.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Like they cut off the water and all that.
Because he couldn't pay his bills.
Yeah.
And the responsibility he kind of has isn't like, what would you say, a high school teenager. It's more of like an adult who works full time, provides for a family. Like he's doing that. He's providing for his dad, his mom sometimes too, and he helps Miss Jackie shovel her driveway. He's helping a whole bunch of other people, right?
Yeah, I agree. He matured at a very young age.
Yeah.
He's doing stuff that someone our age really shouldn't be doing, especially taking care of the people who are twice his age, like his mother and his father, and along with his elderly neighbors. One who has mental issues, along with his girlfriend, or not his girlfriend, the daughter who is his girlfriend.
And the irony I found is that I feel like the adults there are more immature than Jared.
Yeah, so it's like the adults and the children switch roles, right? And that's what's unique about Eden Robinson's like one-of-a-kind story, Son of a Trickster, right?
Because almost all the other books, they always have, the adults are really mature, the kids are super not mature and they're ignorant, they just go do whatever. This role, it kind of switches and puts it in a different perspective.
Yeah. So, like Kira said, Jared is more like he's looking after his family. He's doing stuff that an adult would do instead of a regular teenager. And this kind of bridges off one of my Reed Hugo sources, so hopelessness and excessive drinking among Aboriginal adolescents. So it states that Canadian Aboriginal youth with higher levels of hopelessness are more susceptible to depressive symptoms, which leads them to drink to cope, and that ultimately puts them at risk of excessive drinking. So in the story, like Kashyap mentioned, there's a lot of graphic information about substance abuse, and that's because of Jared's struggles, right? What do you guys think about that?
And I also feel like even though Jared drinks a lot, he's still in control of himself, right? Because like he's still taking care of his dad. He's putting money aside for like the important stuff.
And surprisingly, for someone who sells pot or weed, he doesn't smoke that much or does it that much. If you look throughout the book, every now and then during a party he'll do it, but he's not constantly high or
exactly.
Sober,
the purpose
right?
of it is to like kind of get money for his family, right? That's his whole purpose of like distributing like drugs
He has
effectively,
that
right?
goal in mind.
Yeah, he has a goal in mind.
It's a bigger picture than just selling drugs, right?
Yeah. Along with a lot of indigenous youth who abuse substance, they use it as a coping mechanism. Jared in the story really just drinks, and even the sometimes that he does smoke pot or eat his own cookies, it's as a coping mechanism because everything that he has to deal with in his life has gotten too much or he is struggling with.
Exactly, and that coping mechanism can turn into excessive drinking, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that were mentioned in one of the presentations earlier. That's an issue, substance abuse, right?
Yeah.
Simple as that, and then like I mentioned earlier, like he has no support. Who does he go to for help, right?
Yeah.
Even at schools, where schools is genuinely a setting where you go ask for help, you go learn new things, right? He's literally like working for his life.
Yeah, and it also connects to the stereotype presentation that I did.
Yeah, you did the stereotype presentation too, right? Yeah,
I did that. So it says how indigenous people are alcoholics and they suffer from depression, and the story kind of relates to it because Jared was going through these stuff.
Yeah.
Going off of what you said about like coping and all that, like using drugs as a coping mechanism. And so basically, not only does Jared like provide for his family, but he also takes a lot of like physical abuse, right? Like from pretty much everyone in his life, He's constantly in that source of between violence and love.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. There's
Yeah.
a time where he got beat up from doing drugs by others, some random high school kids.
Yeah, at the
Yeah.
powder house, right? Yeah.
Also by his stepdad, like for not getting good grades.
Yeah.
But Jared was trying to provide for his family, so he couldn't focus on getting good grades. And so when that happened, his stepfather got mad at him.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, the love versus violence is a major theme in this story.
Yeah.
Jared, like I said, young teenager, right? So the way I see it, it's like a universal truth of parenting, right? The child generally only wants love and to be appreciated, but he's not appreciated enough because he receives abuse even after what he does, right?
Yeah.
That's why when he goes to Mrs. Jax's and Mr. Jax's house to help them with their chores, he doesn't ask for money. He asks just for food.
Yeah.
He just and then he feels so appreciated after, right?
Yeah.
So you can see the contrast between his family and his neighbors,
Yeah.
right?
It's a crazy contrast.
It's
and all he
crazy
does is
contrast.
shovel the snow, and he just wants some
Yeah.
food and some love in
And
return.
the
right?
two people that actually that he felt affection for, right? One was his dog, which sadly in the start of the book just passed away.
Yeah.
And another is his grandma, I think Nana Sophia.
Nana Sophia, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so those are the only two people that he could go to with his problems, right? And who are they're
And he also had a girlfriend throughout the book, Sarah,
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah.
who he actually loved too.
Right?
And then he doesn't. I wouldn't say he does love his mom, but it's more of like a love-hate relationship. Like
Yeah.
throughout the book, you'll see they really crack jokes, but sometimes they're really you could say dark jokes.
Yeah.
And his little she definitely beats him too as well. I think it's mentioned when he was younger as well. But he has that kind of love-hate relationship between his mom too.
Yeah.
You could really see how he was getting annoyed from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could 100%.
And it's
Yeah.
obvious that his mom loves him very much. She just has a different way of showing it, and she doesn't know how to control her urges because she has her own problems in her life,
Yeah.
along with Jared.
Yeah, that makes sense because at the beginning of the book, when her mom's boyfriend tried to kill Jared with the bulldogs, she saved him by killing the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then she also mentioned, even in the beginning of the book, when Anita Moody, so, the mother, Maggie, her mother, so Jared's grandmother, right? She hated Jared, right? She hated Jared, and then Maggie was like, I'll do anything for you, right? She was like, even if I have to kill for you, I will do that, right?
Yeah.
So, like Kira mentioned, she loves Jared, but in an aggressive manner. So she would do anything for him, right? Welcome back from our commercial break. So for the first half of this week's episode, Son of a Trickster, we focused on the themes, characters, and personal opinions on the story. Now we will discuss how this story is suited for students our age. Or is it? What do you guys think?
For students our age,
Yeah.
I would say it's suitable, 100%.
You sure?
It definitely attracts our attention, attracted my attention. I liked reading the book, and I finished the book too.
Even after all the graphic scenes and all I guess the profanity used in the story, you still think it's suited for students our age?
I think so because I feel like everyone our age does watch these movies with these graphics and all.
Yeah.
I think
And-
especially it's not suited for kids who aren't in of high school age because it deals with some very heavy topics like abuse, substance abuse, and a bunch of other stuff that kids in middle school shouldn't have to read or deal with yet because of their maturity level.
Yeah, I agree. Kids in middle school shouldn't read this story, but as you get older, you kind of have to understand Canadian history and culture. So, and kind of the dark history, I want to say.
Yeah.
So I guess this book really does a good job at doing that.
Yeah, and it's like a young adult's novel, I would say.
Yeah, you know, that's
Yeah,
that's a perfect way to
that's
describe
way
it,
to
right?
put it, yeah.
And also, like, it does a really good job, like, especially for this course, I think it does a really good job for, like, introducing these indigenous topics and, like, you know, the issues that they have. Right? Like, you know, such as substance abuse and stereotypes.
Even intergenerational trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like Jared and his mother, for example,
Yeah.
right? You would assume that, you know, a mother and a son would have like that cliche,
Yeah, really close bond.
really close bond and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But Jared really can't go to his mother for anything, right? And you can see like the abuse, even if it's not physical. Sometimes it's verbal, mental abuse, right?
Yeah. And a couple examples. It's almost like the way she talks to him too. She says it in a jokingly way, but it's a little rude
Yeah.
behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. She kind of expects a lot from him, but she has to understand that he's a kid, right?
Yeah.
Like the universal truth of a parent. But yeah, in general, like I enjoy reading Son of a Trickster. I mean, I thought it was great. They offer such a valuable perspective on our Canadian history and culture, right?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I also like the way the author wrote the book, like the way she described it. It was like very vivid and like descriptive.
Yeah.
So I have a quote from the book
Yeah,
that I
go
could share.
ahead.
It was when Jared first entered the cookie house to
Mhm.
make cookies. So it said that the door was unlocked and the mudroom was festooned with the broken snowboards and bits of things that Jared didn't recognize. The living room was wallpapered with posters of border on pristine mountain runs or jumping off helicopters, bikini chicks, craving hills, and dogs with hand-drawn dreeds who were sitting on boards. Beanbag chair and futon and blown-up furniture and camping coats cluttered the house, jumbled where they had been thrown or fallen. I feel like she's very descriptive. Like it feels like I'm there.
You can almost like visualize what's happening, right? It's
Yeah.
really cool. And that's the powder house, right?
Yeah. It's,
Yeah. Powder house is a
Very
key
early
setting.
setting, yeah.
Yeah. She does a good job.
And she makes it sound really realistic because like you could tell that it's a person who does drugs. It's like that
Mhm.
type of place, right?
Yeah.
I also like the way she introduces these topics. Like, it's not, you know, it doesn't come in right away, right? She like
Mhm.
slowly introduces the fact that, you know, like excessive drinking and stuff like that. She like slowly mentions it. You know, it's not to the point where, you know, bam, it's there.
Yeah.
And she also does a good job on describing how Jared feels.
Yeah.
Like she really goes into like his perspective. It's almost like you're seeing third person and then you're like going into his head and seeing how he feels.
Yeah.
and how he reacts
Yeah.
to
There's
it.
a shift from like third person to
Like
first person, right?
Yeah.
Because you really see how Jared feels. So like throughout the book, you can see his emotions, and then with Eden Robinson's style of like writing, you can see his like, oh, how he feels, right? How he feels throughout the book based on like the trauma he receives, right? And how he has to like cope with that, like via drinking and drugs,
Yeah.
right?
And it's like really realistic because it shows like his life from a young age, and it's like growing up and maturity improvements. Because like he got influenced by his parents from like bad language and drugs, and he got into it.
Yeah.
It's like a moral almost, because like if your parents are into drugs, you will be into drugs as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, kind of going back to what you said about the writing style. In interviews, she said that she has a very dark sense of humor, and it really comes across in this book because not only does it fit Jared's personality very well, when we are outside of his perspective, it's very clear that she has her own distinct writing style, and it makes the book very enjoyable, especially for me.
Yeah, I mean, like with all the topics that were and all the graphic scenes that were presented in the novel, the humor just added that little touch, you know, that little touch to the book.
Yeah,
and
like
it was really good.
I think in the start, right? When I think there were dogs like chasing Jared. Like she comes in and like runs over the dog.
Yeah.
And then she looks at the owner and says, you know, I'm sorry about your dog. And then the owner, you'd normally expect the owner to be mad, but the owner says that don't worry, I have another one. And so
Yeah, they just make it into a funny way.
Yeah, they make it to a funny way, but they also like get the point across, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Eden Robinson, what an author. And I'm
She did a great job.
like, with that said, like as Eden Robinson being like an amazing author, I'm kind of happy we got Son of a Trickster.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys
am as
think? I mean, there's other stories like Medicine Walk.
Yeah.
One Good Story, That Story, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
My
I think I
apologies
read
for butchering that.
Indian Horse.
Mhm.
in the most kindest way possible. It's not as good as Son of a Trickster.
Yeah,
Son of a Trickster was just on top. You
Yeah,
know?
Son of
The
a Trickster
humor, the
definitely.
way she wrote, like everything is just perfectly together.
I feel like I don't really read books that often, right? If I read, it's gotta be like comics and stuff like that. But I feel like something about this book, man.
Yeah, it's like the pacing is perfect. It's never too boring or
Yeah.
never too fast. Like it kept me engaged throughout the whole book.
The overall
Exactly.
storyline and like the flow was also like on point.
And it hit the target audience. I
Yeah.
mean, we're the target audience, right? Like as we all mentioned,
And it caught
Right?
our attention.
caught our attention. Even from the first chapter, I was engaged.
Yeah, and just like Harida said, it's not like there wasn't any fillers or you would say like vague spots. It kept your attention all the way throughout. Maybe there was some spots that weren't as intense, but then right after it would pick up. Like it was just steady pace the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always like a mystery point. Like you're always looking forward to something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we found a lot of mystery points,
Yeah,
right?
we
Like
did.
in the beginning of the book, if Wiget would make a return, something
Yeah.
like that.
Like on the bus stop, right?
On the bus stop, yeah, on the bus
Yeah.
stop.
I didn't expect that part, like, you know.
Oh, that part was crazy.
It just
Right?
it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That
And then
wouldn't have thought that he would just show up
yeah,
almost magically and then disappear just as quickly.
it just showed up. Yeah. And I like how it's cool how she added that he turned into like a raven instead of just disappearing to thin air. She added like that little touch showing a little
Has
bit
that
of indigenous.
supernatural effect,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Oh, that's what caught me too, right? 'Cause I just find those things really cool, right?
Yeah.
How you like turn into a raven and then flapped away.
Yeah, that was
Right?
pretty.
Really, really cool. Great use of symbolism,
Yeah.
like realism as well,
Yeah.
right? Ian Robinson did a great job. And like I mentioned before, happy you chose Son of a Trickster.
You know how you said you like supernatural phenomena?
Mhm.
Do you believe in those?
Ah, man. Do I believe in supernatural phenomena? I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys believe it? Like, it's pretty chicken for me to
Describe
answer.
supernatural phenomena.
I mean, like, isn't that like ghosts or like
Oh yeah,
things that are
I would say I
unrealistic?
believe in it.
Actually,
Definitely.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I feel like for me to believe in it, I would have to see it in person.
Mhm.
Because I heard a lot of stories, but it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
You're like a see it to believe it kind of guy.
I see it to
Yeah.
believe it. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Some people have like this. This is like a whole nother topic we're diving into. But yeah, I think it's really cool. Like even seeing if they made a like a live action version of this, it'd be cool if they added a little bit more supernatural phenomenons because you can do a lot more with like video things. You could add CGI. You can do all of this to kind of add a
Yeah, you
different
know what?
effect.
And then like referring back to Trickster, like the CBC show, I wonder how they add those like supernatural events, right? Like I wonder like how they do it.
Yeah, honestly.
Right? Now I'm like more excited to watch that show. I won't lie.
Yeah, it's really catching up, right?
Yeah.
All right, that was a great discussion. I wanted to look at some reviews because we've read this book so much. I wanted to see some other people's perspectives on how they came in.
Yeah.
So looking online, I found this one person's review. Their subtopic was, it was raw, painful realism of a child of alcoholism coupled with a couple other cultures. And they rated it 4.5. They said it's like a tricky book. No pun intended. And they said, on one hand, it's tons of realistic, heart-wrenching depictions of generational abuse, drug use, alcoholism, and unhealthy relationships. And then there's like another hand where it's the raw depiction of First Nation folks on the off-res in Canada. What do you guys think?
I mean, that pretty much there sums it up, right? It has all the indigenous issues in Canada,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like this book, it was at Canada Reads, right, for CBC, right? It was really presented there.
Yeah.
I feel like people should, when they read this book, they should focus on the indigenous issues and how this is still a thing today, right? These issues are still prominent today. So like, what are, like, for example, what is the government doing, right?
Yeah,
They're not doing much.
They're not doing
right?
nothing, honestly.
And school systems, for example, right?
Yeah.
When we look at Jared, I mean, like majority of the book is Jared's perspective, right? He goes to school, but
It's not mentioned a whole lot in the book either.
it's not mentioned a whole lot in the book either.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get a lot of support at school, right? He doesn't have someone to go to and like kind of talk to about his issues, right?
Yeah.
So he kind of like bottles it in
Not just from schools, from everyone.
from everyone, exactly.
Yeah.
Bottles it in, and then this is where he drinks and abuses drugs just to
Yeah.
cope with that,
And
right?
eventually he's gonna lash out too, and then it's gonna be twice as bad, right?
Exactly, yeah. So as a personal fan, what would you rate this? What would you rate this book?
Personally, I would rate the book 4.3 stars.
4.3? That's a very
Yeah.
specific.
That's very specific, right? Because there's always, I don't know, there's always like that 5-star is like perfect. You would read this book 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read books 100 times, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like that I can't give it a 5, but it's definitely close to it because it just hits all the points and it's really interesting too.
Mhm.
And the supernatural effect really brings it together because I feel if there wasn't a supernatural effect, it would just be boring to me.
Yeah.
Boring in the sense like there isn't any sort of action or like sci-fi kind of
Yeah.
thing because that's the things that I look into when I look at books or movies or this.
Yeah.
So that grabs my attention from the book.
It's very subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
supernatural is just adds that little touch, you
A
know.
little touch, yeah.
All right.
What would you rate the book?
Me? You know what? I would go like really close to 5 stars. Like maybe like even a 4.5
Yeah.
out of 5. I mean, like you mentioned before, that supernatural effect really caught me as well because I look into like sci-fi
Mhm.
and like all those things when I look into like movies or TV shows or even books themselves.
Yeah.
The book really shined light on a bunch of indigenous issues, and I love like the style of the book in regards to like it went from third person, then it went to Jared's emotions right away, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of in the mind of an indigenous teenager who is going through a lot,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? And I feel like that's something a lot of books lack, right?
Yeah.
A lot of books I've read in previous English classes, they were just like, they put the issue, like you mentioned before, they put the issue there, there's no flow in it. The issue is just there.
It's
This
just-
book, you can see character development, and you can see how the plot just like goes through,
Just flows really well, right?
flows really well. Exactly. And that's, yeah, like you said, would I read this again? Yeah, I would. But would I read this 100 times? I don't know.
Right?
Right? I don't know.
I feel
But
like
it's-
I would give it a 4.6. This is because like for any book I read, it was just not it. It's like I cannot read books, right? Because I'm not a book type of person. But this book was special. It was like it kept me engaged with the whole book, right? So yeah.
And that must say a lot too, because if you don't usually read books and then you find a book that
I'm
really
usually
likes.
a movie person, but this book
Yeah.
felt like a movie. It
Yeah.
felt like watching a movie because it was
Yeah.
so
It
descriptive.
really did.
Yeah.
And the way the plot flows, it was really kind of, in my mind, I imagined it more as something that was a movie instead of, something that I had to read because I had to read it for English.
Yeah. What would you rate the book, Kira?
For me, agreeing with Nicole, I'd probably give it like a 4.5. It's really well written and it touches on a lot of important topics in a fun and digestible way. But it's not something that I would probably read 100 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kashyap, what do you think about the book?
So I personally give it a 4.7.
Okay.
For
That's
me,
a high rating.
yeah, for me it was definitely because of the fact that the humor,
Yeah.
right, that it comes in. I love reading humorous books. Also, I like the fact that like the author, right, she doesn't circle around a point too much. She gets to it quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of like a good pace, right? I personally don't like novels that involve the person just like explaining the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? This one is like she explains it to the point where you understand what it's about and then she moves on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She really draws out each plot point that leads to the larger story arc,
Yeah.
and it fits really well instead of just sticking to the one story arc and kind of just circling around the point for the whole book. Because that to me would make the story really, really boring.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of filler, as I think you mentioned it before.
Yeah, a little bit before. Yeah.
Not a lot of filler. It just gets to the point,
Yeah.
but it doesn't just like center
Skim
on it,
over it.
right? Yeah.
Skim over
It,
like
it
mentions it and then it'll kind of step away from it, but still
It'll,
keeping
it'll
that.
flow. It'll flow throughout the whole plot. So
Yeah.
as you get, it's like a puzzle piece. You have
Yeah.
one piece there, right?
Yeah.
And then the others are just connected to make the
Yeah.
whole plot.
Yeah,
right?
just like Kira said, it's like one arc that leads to the bigger story arc.
Yeah.
And like that's, I don't know, I think that's the perfect way to kind of put it. There's a whole bunch of small things, but it all leads to the bigger thing, right?
Mhm.
Like even from the start, his grandma said it was his son. He was the son of a trickster, right? And it leads to the end.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. The beginning part and the end part kind of like it connected.
Perfectly.
Oh, I love those. Even like movies too. I
Yeah.
love those.
Yeah, I love when it's like a spark from the beginning and
Yeah.
it connects to the end, so it keeps you engaged.
It keeps you engaged. It keeps you thinking, okay, so we know the beginning, right? And like we kind of have an idea what's happening in the end. Like, how does he go from the beginning to the end? Like, what happens in the middle, right?
Exactly.
It all kind of just circles back around to the beginning.
Exactly, yeah. All in all, I think Son of a Trickster was a great book. You
Yeah.
know, great doesn't even cover it. Amazing
Yeah,
book.
it was amazing book. 100%.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully we get to read Trickster Drift, which is the second part of the book.
Or we can even watch a TV show in class when it comes out.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe we can ask Mr. Shasky, and maybe we can watch an episode of Trickster.
Yeah, and show how
Right?
good it is to everyone else too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That would be cool.
I mean, this book is amazing, right?
Yeah.
You have to read this book.
You have to
Yeah.
read this book.
There's no doubt about it. Everyone has to at least read a couple chapters.
Yeah, if
And then-
you're in high school, read this book.
If
Honestly.
if you pick up the book and like just like start reading the first page, I guarantee you'll like continue moving on.
Yeah, and you realize it just gets better and better and better and better.
Yeah, exactly. It just gets better. That's the
Yeah.
perfect way to end it.
It just gets better and better. There's not really anything bad about it. Once you just get hooked, it just keeps getting better, better, better all the way up.
You honestly just like binge read it.
Yeah,
right?
honestly, it's the type of book that you would binge read,
Yeah.
or like you'd read on a road trip.
It's never a downfall. It's always either up or steady, or it just
Yeah.
continues going up.
Yeah.
There's never a down moment.
Yeah, there's never a down moment. Yeah.
And it just perfectly wraps up at the end as well. It's just
There's
just
always
a good
so
book.
much going on.
Yeah.
Alright. So thank you for tuning into our podcast about Son of a Trickster. Hope you guys get a chance to read it. Maybe even look into the TV show Trickster by CBC News. Take care. See you then.
But